Are you optimistic about our future? Like, how do you see this playing out?
I think America is repeating a lot of what Plato would see as the mistakes of Athenian democracy. So ancient Athens and ancient Rome kind of give us two possible scenarios of how our future might look like, and neither one of them looks that great. So if we're Athens, then our geopolitical military projects will eventually backfire and we will have political turmoil. And if we're Rome, we might turn into an empire with a king on the throne in Washington, D.C., and a lot of the former members of both parties having killed each other off.
Sick.
We're laughing about it, but it's not that funny. You know?
No, it's not funny.
If you're a prisoner, all you see are shadows on a wall ahead of you, in front of you, okay? And you think these are the real objects of the world. So now you're gonna go to the prisoners and you're gonna say, I can show you the truth, but it's gonna be painful. What's gonna happen? Nothing is permanent in the world that our senses perceive. The only realm of our thinking where we have no margin of error is in that non-physical realm.
So they say that some of the technology that we have today is stuff it's already there. They get these downloads, so you could call it whatever you want, but they'll tell you, I didn't really come up with that, man. It just kind of came to me, whether it be in a dream or whatever it is, but they're pulling from somewhere else. What do you think Plato would think of AI and super intelligence? And did he ever talk about something like that, an intelligence that surpasses humans, or is there anything that we know about?
Well,
static in the mind, but the signal's clear. Close both eyes and you disappear. Slide through the seams and reality screen. Wake up inside of an in-between. I'm not here to preach a story you can't feel.
Okay, can I ask you just a blanket, and then, because, okay, guys, I think it's important we probably preface with explaining to a 5-year-old, maybe not 5-year-old, but a 10-year-old, what Plato's cave is, some of the basics, right? For my audience, the goal would be in a perfect world, people who are into OBEs, out of body experiences, that sort of thing, they get to hear, kind of a philosophical angle, and vice versa. I would love for this conversation to be able to translate to both your world, who's never heard of OBEs, or it's all woo woo to them. I'll try and ground that the best I can, and vice versa. That's kind of the plan.
Are you gonna do an intro? Or are we just?
I'll do it on my own. Yeah, so I'll do a separate intro after the combo, so we don't have to worry about that. But
okay,
what do you think the people should know, man? What are some of the basics as far as Plato's cave? Do you want to start with that, or do you think we should start somewhere else?
Sure, we should perhaps just say a bit about Plato. I don't know how familiar your audience is.
Let's do it.
Plato.
Yeah,
arguably the greatest philosopher in the Western tradition. Every time there's a poll among academic philosophers today on who is the greatest philosopher of all time in the West, Plato's always 1 or 2, rarely 3. The other contenders are Aristotle, sometimes Kant, but Plato's always, at least runner-up. And you might have heard the famous quotation from the British mathematician Alfred Whitehead, to the effect that all of Western philosophy consists in footnotes to Plato, and that's because Plato established really all of the major questions in philosophy. He didn't give all the answers. In fact, he emphatically refused to give some answers because he thought that the questions were more important than the answers. But he laid out the whole field, all the different questions, all the different fault lines, the debates, and everything that we're still debating and working through today. And the greatest work of this potentially greatest philosopher of the West is The Republic, which is a utopian treatise. This is, I got volume 2 today because of the cave. So the most famous passage in this most famous work of this most famous philosopher is the Allegory of the Cave, which we'll talk about today, which describes a bunch of prisoners in a cave who don't know what reality is. And there are many ways to interpret that, but that's one of the most compelling images from the history of philosophy. It's given rise to all kinds of movies, stories, spin-offs, etc. So I'll leave it at that, and you can tell me where you want to go next.
Yeah, I love it, man. When Plato talks, or I guess he likes to leave things, you said on purpose, unanswered sometimes because the question is more important. What's interesting, man, on my side of it, I've talked to quite a few different individuals. You know, a pillar of my channel is absolutely out-of-body experiences. And I don't know, are you familiar with those at all? Or is that a totally foreign? Have you had any
I've
out-of-body?
heard.
Have you had experiences or anything
I've
crazy?
never had one. I've heard about them. I find the topic fascinating, but it's not one that I know much about.
Have you ever had an experience that you can't explain? Like anything remotely, I guess, superhuman or spiritual, I guess?
I mean, I've had incredibly vivid dreams.
Have you had a
Um,
lucid dream? Like, have you been able to like control a dream?
I mean, it's happened that I had like a vivid dream, and then I was woken up, and I was like, "Damn it!" And I like was able to fall back asleep and continue it. Does that count? I don't know.
I mean, yeah. Well,
Okay.
it's you know, lucid is more. It's more you're able to control it, right? You realize whilst in the dream
Mm-hmm.
that you are dreaming, and then from there, depending on how advanced you are, I mean, things can get weird pretty quickly. Um, I don't know, man. There's so many. Like, I want to. Maybe we'll stay on the cave for a little bit, and I would love for you to kind of dive into that story, or, like the story, what you think it means, what he meant by it. Um, because one thing I'll say is like, okay, so talking to so many different people,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, out of body stuff is a pillar of my channel, and we've had everyone from just your everyday people who say they can do it, right, to pretty, I don't know, in our space, respected teachers, right, who are able to have a process that is repeatable and their students are having these experiences. I'm a result of that, actually. So when I got into this whole space, it was definitely a lot of curiosity, some I think deservedly like skepticism. But I was able to set that aside and kind of put the practice in play. It took about 6 months for this to happen for me. The only reason I even went down this road really is because I had two experiences when I was in high school that I could not shake. Basically, it's called sleep paralysis. I woke up in my room at that time, not able to move, like fully aware that I was awake, and I could see my room, like my eyes were open. I don't know if they were open at that time, but I, I just imagined frozen, right? And I was like, what is going on? And so that moment, because I was raised religious, was totally foreign to me. I just like had no clue what was happening. And to be honest, it scared the shit out of me. I mean, it was extremely scary. It was like
Yeah.
you're just trying to figure it out in the moment, like what is happening to me. Um, I remember closing my eye, like trying to move my muscles, and I couldn't. It was this freakiest feeling. Couple weeks later, or maybe it was like a month or so, but pretty close related, it happened again. The second time was a little more dramatic because I felt, it's like, that's hard to explain, man. It's we're getting into the woo-woo territory, but it's true. I mean, I felt like something was there. Can't prove it, can't any of that, but it was like I won't forget the feeling. And it scared me. I called my buddy. I said, hey man, I need you to pray for me because it felt dark, is the best way to explain that. And so years, 10 years later, decades later, I came across it started with NDEs, right? They're just fascinating stories. They happen all over the world. There's even some recorded uh, by Emanuel Swedenborg. I mean, I don't know how far it goes, but I would imagine these texts talk about this kind of stuff. It could probably be many things interpreted, but
Yeah.
then it led to OBs, and they talked about sleep paralysis. I didn't know that was the name of it, figured out what that was, but he described that feeling that happened to me, this guy named Darius. And so that's what led me to taking the course, because I was like, you know what? He says if that happens to you, you're close. That's called what he does is he basically trains you to get into that state, which upon hearing that, Jack, I was like, why the hell would anyone want to get in that state? It was scary. But he said, you're very close at that point to being able to roll out of your body. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Let's give this a shot. I'm either going to waste $200 or it's going to happen. And how crazy would that be if it happened? So it happened to me. So again, it took me 6 months, but when it happened, it's just one of those things, man, that like, I don't know. It's almost doesn't matter like I'm past the point of like wanting to prove it to anyone because it's happened to me. It's happened to so many other people, and it's so vivid. It's so real that it's just, you kind of have to have it happen. I know it sounds pretentious a little bit, but it's true. And it opened me up to like, okay, what else is real? And so now that story is important because then I've talked to all kinds of people now, out of body people, people who've claimed to have been abducted by aliens, people who claim there's like secret space programs going on. That's led me to reading all kinds of books. Some seem pretty damn credible. Some seem, a little bit of a stretch. But what I'm kind of getting at is where I've landed with all this, because I go from, okay, this is the truth, to like having another conversation, being like, nah, this is, and now I'm confused, to having someone else who's totally, I mean, 100% conviction that what they have going on is the reality of this world. It seems to come back to beliefs to me. Like that's the only way I can think of where everyone is true in their own way. It's like whatever you believe, there seems to be this power to your belief, whether it be you're a Christian and you think it's this way, or if you think there's no God, or if you think out of body stuff is real. Like I don't, it just seems to belief is like, it's a weird rule of the game where it makes everyone correct, and therefore also a lot of confusion because everyone's like, this is the way, this is the way. Plato's kind of like, it's interesting because I like that he just asked the question because it seems like a similar kind of thing. It's like, it could be interpreted in so many different ways. Um, but yeah, so I don't know if there's even a question. I just want to kind of preface like how I got here and what that all kind of means to me. But I would love to hear about the clay the cave a little bit more.
Well, that's great because you've hit on a lot of topics that come up in the Republic. In fact, the Republic ends with what you call an NDE and at the same time an OBE. So the Republic ends with a story about a guy who dies and sees the world beyond, but then ends up not being dead and then brings that knowledge back to his fellow mortals. Okay.
It was like Air. What is his name?
Yeah,
ER
exactly.
something?
Air. Yes.
Okay.
Air. So that's not the cave, but that ties in, you know. But maybe we should just explain what the cave story is.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So another quick preface. Okay, so the Republic is a utopian work. It imagines a perfect society according to its author. Okay, the main speaker is Socrates, who is Plato's teacher, long dead by the time Plato's writing this. Okay, so Socrates is the main character in almost all of Plato's works, but this is not the historical Socrates. Okay, this is Plato, his ideas, but he is putting them into his hero's mouth. Okay. So I'm just saying that so that we're not confused by why I'm saying Socrates sometimes. Okay, so Socrates is the character Socrates, explaining what he sees as the most beautiful ideal society. And that's basically a huge world-building exercise, to use modern language. And in order to explain this ideal society, you have to go through, well, okay, what are they going to be eating? What are they going to be learning in school? What are they going to believe in terms of science and religion, right? What's their education going to be like? What's their entertainment going to be like? What music are they going to listen to, right? Everything is included. That's why this is an encyclopedic work of philosophy that touches over all these things, okay? And so once you get that world building almost complete, there's the middle sections of the Republic are like, well, hold on, what actually is knowledge? Like we just said, we're going to teach the kids these things because it'll make them smart and knowledgeable, but what is knowledge in its essence? And you get this this kind of, the core of the Republic are these so-called metaphysical explorations, and one of those is the cave. Okay, so Socrates, the character Socrates, says, let's next compare our experience or our nature regarding education to the following image. It's a kind of vague sentence, okay, but he's saying, I'm going to give you this allegory or image, and it's going to give you some insights into what our experience of education is like, okay? And he says, imagine there's a cave, and there's a bunch of prisoners that are shackled, and they're looking at the far end of the cave. Okay, so let's say hole in the ground, goes pretty far down, then turns sideways and goes far away from the hole, so there's no light coming in from the outside, okay? And at the far end of that cave, there's a wall, like a movie screen, let's say, like a movie theater screen, and the prisoners are shackled and facing that far end of the wall, okay? Now, behind them, and unbeknownst to them, there is a low wall, just about the height of a human, and then further away from the prisoners, past that low wall, is a fire. And between the fire and that low wall, there are other people who are not prisoners, and they are carrying objects above their heads and the fire is projecting the shadows of those objects onto the far wall. Okay? So the prisoners, they don't see the shadows of the people holding those objects because they're standing behind a low wall that blocks their shadows. They only see the shadows of the objects that those guys are holding over their heads. Okay.
So they're seeing it projected onto the wall.
Yes.
That's what the shadows, right?
Yeah. So I think Plato calls these people who are not prisoners the like thaumatopoi, which means like the miracle makers or something. Okay. So if you're a prisoner, all you see are shadows on a wall ahead of you, in front of you. Okay. But you don't know they're shadows. You don't even know what a shadow is. Right. But you see images and they seem crisp to you. You've seen them your whole life. So to you, that's the reality, right? You see what looks like, but you see the shadow of, say, a rabbit because somebody is holding a rabbit statue over the fire. It's not even a real rabbit, right? Or somebody's holding like a Barbie doll and you see like the shadow of a woman, or somebody's holding like a plastic tree over the fire and you see what looks like a tree on the far wall, and you think these are the real objects of the world. Okay.
This is your reality. As far as you know, this is real. This is life.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And now Socrates says, imagine that one of these prisoners breaks free. And imagine that prisoner turns around towards the fire and the quote-unquote real objects, of which everything he had seen previously were just shadows. Okay. At first, the fire is going to be blindingly bright to that person who has grown up in the shadows, right? So at first, the fire and the physical objects are going to be much more, first of all, painful to look at, but also much less defined. So they're probably going to be like, oh, that's, whatever that is, it's fuzzy, it's painful. I'm going to go back to these crisp images on the wall that I know, because that's obviously more real than whatever's back there. Okay? But now suppose that some enlightened teacher, like Socrates, grabs you by the neck and says, no, I'm going to show you what's actually real, and like forces you to look at the fire. At first you're going to be angry, like, what the hell, man? Like, leave me alone. This is crazy. What you're showing me is much less defined, right? And then Socrates explains what would happen if you dragged this person out of the cave. Okay. So eventually they would get used to, their eyes would acclimate to the fire, and then they would see the objects that are casting the shadows. And eventually they would see, okay, actually, these are much more crisp than the shadows in the wall. So these are probably the real things. And what I grew up seeing are just images of these things, derivative images. Okay. But then that's not the end of the journey, because then this enlightened teacher says, no, you've only made it a few steps towards the true reality. So then you drag that person to the opening of the cave, and then it's going to be even more blindingly bright, and they're going to be kicking and screaming the whole way, like, why are you doing this to me? I'm seeing less and less clearly with every step. But let's say you get them out of the cave, okay? At first, they're going to take refuge in some shade, like under a bush or under a tree, and they're going to be covering their eyes. And for a long time, they're only going to be able to see, again, shadows, things in the shade, maybe reflections in a pond here and there. But eventually, their eyes will adjust again, and then they will see real objects out there. So they might see an actual tree for the first time, and they'll see that the shadow of a tree was not only derivative of the fake tree that the guy was holding in front of the fire, but that fake tree was derivative of the real tree out here. So the quote-unquote reality they grew up with is actually 2 steps removed from the true reality. Okay? But it doesn't end there, because eventually they're going to realize that even these quote unquote real objects out here, like the actual tree and the actual humans and the actual animals, which are 2 steps removed from what they grew up with, those that themselves come from the sun, because it's the sun that has generated this world with its energy and its life-giving force that has allowed these creatures to come to be. And so in a sense, the shadows on the wall were like 3 steps removed from the source of being, which is the sun. And that's like the ultimate enlightenment, as it were. Okay, so we're almost done now. Okay, so now
I love it. I love it.
now Socrates says, imagine if this person who, you know, was dragged up here kicking and screaming, it was a very painful process, but finally is like, okay, no, this is real. And he thinks, or he or she, because Plato is very insistent that men and women are equally able to achieve this enlightenment path. So he or she remembers their former fellow bondsmen, fellow prisoners in the cave, and is like, okay, I got to go rescue my friends, right? So they go back down there. And they go back down there, and they find their friends all shackled and still watching those shadows. And there's those people who are the miracle makers who are casting those shadows. And by the way, the cave is an echo chamber. So those people who are casting the shadows are also speaking and saying things like, what you're now seeing is a rabbit, and a rabbit is a mammal with 4 legs, and blah, 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 right? And they can make up whatever they want, and nobody can challenge them. But there's obviously like a power dynamic there, right? Like the miracle makers have a certain authority in that cave, and nobody questions them. So now you're going to go to the prisoners, and you're going to say, don't believe these images. Don't believe the voices you hear describing these images. It's all many removes from reality. I can show you the truth, but it's going to be painful. What's going to happen?
They're going to call you crazy. They're going to be like, no, dude, I'm comfortable. I'm
if
good.
you're lucky, Socrates says they might even kill you, which is Plato inserting like a prophecy of Socrates' death, because Socrates was eventually killed for exactly that reason. Okay, so that's the full story arc of the path to enlightenment and the dangers therein.
There's so many similarities to just, it's so true, just even in your own life when, like I'll just tie it to the OBE thing, right? Like you have this experience and you want to tell someone about it, and they're like, dude, what are you talking about? Like not only that, but then just, there's so many similarities to that story. And it's so true, right? When you go back to tell people like, hey man, there's so much more out there. People are comfortable. They're like, no, I'm good. Or they demonize you, right? You become like a weirdo. And in our world today, that's just more or less being outcasted, right? So crazy. My very first one, I'm hearing this story is like, what made him, did he have, or on record, did he talk about experiences that he had that made him even come up with that story? Or is he just that intuitive where he's like, this has to be, like, why would he think that there's a whole nother world out there?
Well, that's a very difficult question. We don't have any like personal writings of Plato where, we don't have like his journal where he says, last night I experienced this or that, right? We only have his published works. We do have a couple of letters that are a bit more personal, but really we have to go with what the writings that survive. But one thing I can say is that Plato is working at, he's standing on the shoulders of giants. There were earlier philosophers that experienced or that described, the truth out there that's beyond the senses. We don't have many of their writings, but we know their names and we have some fragments of their work. So particularly there was a guy named Parmenides. If you're looking for ancient precedents to like out-of-body experiences, you should check out Parmenides.
Okay, I will.
There's actually a kind of British mystical philosopher named Kingsley. I forgot this first name, something Kingsley, and he's aware of like all kinds of traditions of mystical experiences, and he kind of interprets Parmenides in that light. But already from Parmenides, there was this idea that the world of the senses, of sensory perception, is not the real world, and that there is a more stable, eternal, true world that is accessed only by the mind and not by the senses. Okay, so then in opposition to that, there's the kind of empiricist, or we would say the Ionian tradition of more scientific types who are like, no, everything is just elements or atoms and void, or it's all mechanical, and we can discover the mechanical processes, etc. And Plato is, so one of the reasons why Plato is the greatest ancient Greek philosopher, in my opinion, is not that he's a genius who thought of everything. He's the genius who synthesized everything. Like, he looked at all of these different traditions and he combined them into this encyclopedic synthesis. And so he's trying to reconcile these two separate traditions, the kind of what we would say the scientific empiricist one, and then the mystical tradition that sees the senses as illusory. And he kind of combines them and says, well, okay, there is this physical world, and there are empirical sciences which can achieve limited understanding of the physical world, but there's also separately the world of forms. I don't know if your viewers know this term, but
it was going to be one of my questions.
It's also called the world of ideas. There's the world of forms, which is not the physical world. It's the world accessed by the mind, if you do your math and your philosophy correctly. And that's where the real knowledge and truth is.
Do you ever think about like it always feels like guys like, let's talk about Jesus, or I don't know, like Plato, these like great thinkers, or these people that could do miracles, right? Like, it's always in the past. It's never like someone modern. And I guess I'll stop there though. Is there a modern Plato, like a unique thinker that you would say, wow, this is a, or is it because everything's been thought of before? Like, why? It always feels like it's something in the ancient we're studying and it's past, and it's not like today. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I've thought about this, and there may very well be a brilliant thinker in our time, but we won't really know about it until 200 years from now, because it takes a while for all the noise to kind of wither away. Like, none of these guys were recognized in their own lifetimes, to the extent that we recognize them.
That's crazy, man. So yeah, what is that? So what do you, okay. As you've studied ancient Greek history, and these philosophers, does it naturally, like, does your brain go to like the deeper questions? Does it kind of always go that route, or do you more just appreciate the thought behind it and just his ability to synthesize everything, or does it kind of lead you? Because Diana, she's someone I really respect, because she started out religious studies. That was kind of her thing, right? And she's like, man, she's like, if you would have told me 10 years ago that I'd be looking into aliens or things like that, she said, I would have said you're crazy. Like, she went to, I forget where she went to school, but she was like a well-established, respected religious studies professor. And she's like, but over time, it's led me to where she is today, which she's definitely a believer that there's more out there, right? That there's these phenomenons, that she's been on all kinds of missions with this guy named Tim Taylor, and she's just had these kind of crazy experiences. It feels like the more you look into that stuff, the more things start to happen in someone's world. Do you have that same kind of effect, or not really?
Well, I think you and I probably differ in in our interests. One reason why I've spent so much of my life studying ancient philosophy is because I think it touches on what I think are the deep questions. And some of those deep questions are not things that mainstream academia talks about, but I'm sure you have that, if we got into the details, we'd find some divergences between what you find most
What are the big
attractive.
questions? What do you think are the big questions?
The biggest one is, what is good? In fact, I think that's the essence of philosophy. It's trying to understand the good. And then,
do you think it could be defined?
Well, there
Because
haven't been that many proposals over the millennia. We only have a few candidates for what is good. You know?
do you feel like good is one of those things, right? Where like if we're going to war with another country, to the other side, that person is good, right? And the other people are bad. To our side, they're the bad guys. We're the good guys. You need good. You need bad to know what good is. You also need good to know what bad is. You need daytime to know what nighttime is. Like all these things, they need each other. And it's very interesting.
Well, one of
Uh,
the big debates across the millennia on this question is the world one where good is opposed to evil in the way that positive charge is opposed to negative charge, or is the world such that there is no such thing as real evil, but bad is just the absence of good? So like with temperature on the Kelvin scale from 0 onward, there's no negative temperature, right? Just cold is just the absence of heat. Okay.
just like darkness is the absence of light. Like
Right.
that sort of
So
thing.
is good and its opposite like temperature, where there is goodness and then there's a lack of it and that's it? Or is it like positive and negative charge, where there is goodness and there can be evil, which is diametrically opposed to goodness? Okay.
What do you
And those are
think?
two very different views. Well, I think that I subscribe to the Platonic and largely ancient Greek view that there's no such thing as evil as such. It's just an absence of good, which I know is very unpopular today. But anyway, and there's some nuances to why they thought that and why I agree. But that's where I'm at.
I'd say I'm in a very similar camp, actually. Only because in the way I feel bad for my audience because I'm just going to repeat it, but it's kind of what I said. You need the other side to know. So how can you demonize that? It's like, especially when I think about like, well, there's really hard topics. Like for me, my thing when I think about evil, it's like things that happen to little kids, right? And stuff like that. Like it's just like, God, that's so clearly
Yes.
evil. But man, that's a slippery slope because you can start. I mean, there's people who have like in their own head, if they were being told it was the good, I don't know, it's like it can get kind of hairy, but I can kind of understand that. Like, I would not like to watch a movie that's just all good, right? Like, it's just so boring. Like, we kind of like the ups and downs or the comeback. And so, like, if you need the down to show you the comeback, I kind of could see the point. And again, I use the war example. So it's like, I do see it. I do understand.
And this is always like I've had this conversation many times. The immediate objection to the bad is the absence of good claim is, what about these horrible people who commit unspeakable, cruel acts against children, against innocents? And that is horrible. And like the ancient Greeks, so interesting point of fact, the ancient Greeks did not have a concept of evil before the Christian period. Okay. So we know of societies where there is no word for evil. There's just a word for bad, and it just means an absence of good. Those societies, it's not like they didn't know of such horribly cruel and unspeakable actions. They did. And even though they witnessed, I mean, like the Greeks, the Greeks in around 500 BC, they had an unsuccessful revolt against the Persian Empire, and the Persians like massacred a huge population and castrated all the young men of like the entire coast of what's now Western Turkey. So the Greeks experienced that horrible event, calamity. They still didn't call the Persians evil. They didn't have a word to use to call the Persians evil. They could have called them cruel, unspeakably like murderous, genocidal even, but they didn't have the word evil. So like you can still describe unspeakable cruelty in a moral framework that doesn't posit the existence of an evil force that is opposed to the good.
I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. And again, I'm in the same boat as you, actually. And the comments I get, or the comments from like my brother or my family, is like they'll bring up the same thing you just talked about. And yeah, I don't understand it. Like I can sit there and easily agree with them. Be like, yeah, I get that. But I also can objectively kind of like look back and say, but, and for all the reasons I said. And you don't even have to go that far. You could just talk about just basic things. I mean, there are religions and cultures where eating cows, right, is just like not cool. That's bad. That's real bad. And to me, I'm like, it's not so bad, man. Like, so it really is. You can see that. Like, if you don't have to go as far as like kids and stuff. But we'll dive more back into the history. But what else are some big questions? I love that. So you said, what is good is one of the ones you think about. Is there anything else that you think about often, or?
Yeah, so then I think the second most important question for me is, what is happiness, or what is the good life? What is worth living for, what's worth dying for, and how can, a miserable mortal like me or you aim for something like a good life, like a happy life, like a kind of life where when we finally leave the world, we feel somehow content with our existence on this planet?
Great question, Jack. Great question.
By the way, is not something modern philosophers care that much about, which is why I love the ancient stuff.
Who's like a modern philosopher? I mean, who? Because that's like the funny part, right? Because you said they're all like you don't know till the end. But is there someone that claims they're a modern philosopher, or is it just people who study philosophy? I guess.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of professors of philosophy. I guess that's what I meant. Modern.
Okay.
So if you go to any university website and look at the philosophy department, look at the faculty, okay, and you look at their publications, their research interests, their talks, the idea of like what's the good life doesn't come up that often anymore. Some people, so actually there's a kind of simple rule of thumb of how to understand the difference between ancient Greek and Roman philosophy versus modern Western philosophy. And this is not my idea, but I've heard it said, and it's pretty good. Ancient philosophy revolved around the question, what is the good life? That was the kind of driving force, the motivating question. Okay, modern philosophy, and by modern I mean like post-Renaissance, modern European philosophy, it revolves around the question, what should I do? Which is a very different question. Okay, it's like, what am I morally obligated to do? I would argue, and here I'm going to get in trouble, but I think your audience is cool. I would argue that that modern philosophy, like past few decades in Western academia, has gone one step further. It's not just what should I do, but what should you do? And listen to me about that.
I like it, man. I like these kind of conversations. Look, when I was in high school and coming out as a complete dummy who didn't pay attention at all, and I got accepted into college, and they're like, "Oh, pick your major." I picked philosophy. That was like my first one.
Oh yeah.
And very quickly, though, I got convinced, unfortunately, that it's not a good way to make money. So I switched out of that, went into the exact opposite probably that you could choose, and I picked fashion and merchandising. So I just made the flop, but I've always been interested. I wouldn't say I'm hoping in the next couple of years to like really sit down and do more reading and really maybe get back some of those years I lost, because I'm interested in it, man. That's why I love talking to people like you and hearing those perspectives. I think it's super unique. What do you think Plato would think of like AI and super intelligence? And did he ever talk about something like that, like an intelligence that surpasses humans, or is there anything that we know about?
Well, he thought that the universe is intelligent in a sense, that human intelligence, let's say, partakes in a greater intelligence. Like Plato has a kind of, a religious streak in his philosophy. And in fact, a lot of Christian theology actually comes from Plato. Nietzsche once said that Christianity is Plato for the masses.
I like it.
So Plato believed in a rational, benevolent deity. And this probably goes back to Socrates in some degree. We also have the dialogues by Xenophon, where Socrates is a major character. So Socrates was kind of like Jesus in that he was this semi-hobo walking around teaching a bunch of students, and then those students, he himself didn't write anything down, but those students went off and wrote the teachings of their teacher. And of those many students, we only have the writings of two of them, Plato and Xenophon. And Xenophon also preserves some teachings of Socrates, and he preserves the story where Socrates basically makes the case like, why would you think that only humans have, I'm going to use the word consciousness. People will debate the translation of the Greek. But let's just say consciousness, intelligence, something like that. Like, why would you think that only we have this thing that appears in our body at birth and then is extinguished at death? Like, doesn't it make more sense that there is a greater consciousness out there and we kind of share that with the universe? So my point is, I think Plato would think that intelligence is a cosmic phenomenon that humans partake in, and so maybe machines can also partake in that to some extent. I don't think he would be as impressed with some of the claims about AI as a lot of people are today, but that's just my own hunch.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, man. Do you think he'd be disappointed or happy with how things are? Let's talk about America, because you said it's kind of it is sort of the foundation of how we do things, right? Do you think he'd be stoked on it, or would he be a little like, we lost our way?
Well, look, Plato is notoriously a fierce critic of democracy. Okay. And
okay.
I think America is repeating a lot of what Plato would see as the mistakes of Athenian democracy. So I think he'd be impressed with our technology, his view is basically democracy is the most wondrous and colorful and diverse and beautiful and attractive of all constitutions. It's the sweetest to live in the short term, but it's got these really serious underlying trends and problems that make it crash and burn in the long run. And so he would probably not be very optimistic about our future.
Yeah. Are you optimistic about our future? Like, how do you see this playing out? It seems, I'll say this, it seems, man, on the outside looking in, or obviously we're both here, but it feels off, man. And I hate to just not have any claims to that. I guess you could just look at the news, but it feels weird. It just feels like when I say the end times, I think, people way undersell it as if it's like a day that happens. I think obviously it probably takes hundreds of years to fully fall, but it feels like we're in that. We've hit the roller coaster, right? And we're starting to like do one of these. That's what it feels like. What do you think?
See, this is the kind of conversation that you would never have in academia. So this is fun. But look, predictions are very difficult. Okay. Like, there's a famous Greek proverb. It says, to melon adilon, which means the future is unclear. It's like one of those simple, pithy statements, and how could you argue with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are very few societies in history that offer like clear parallels with modern America, because here are some things that make us seemingly unique. Okay, we're a democracy. It's very rare historically. We're a superpower, also very rare historically. And democratic superpower, when you combine two rare things, it's even more rare, right? So in a way, I think that and then of the societies in the past that might have been like us, most records don't survive. So for example, Syracuse on the island of Sicily was also a superpower democracy, but almost nothing survives from Syracuse in terms of written sources. Okay, so not only are we a rare kind of beast in history, but let's just say rare bird to not ruffle any feathers. Not only are we a rare bird, but of the other similar rare birds that we know of, we only have good records of a few of them. And the two notable ones for me are ancient Athens and ancient Rome. And so to me, like ancient Athens and ancient Rome kind of give us two possible scenarios of how our future might look like. And neither one of them looks that great. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're Athens, then our geopolitical military projects will eventually backfire, and we will have political turmoil and possibly be rebooted as a more humble democracy, and maybe carry on for another century or two in that more moderate, humbled state. And if we're Rome, we might kick ass and just dominate everybody, but then we're gonna still have a lot of those same problems and turn into an empire with a king on the throne in Washington, D.C., and a lot of the former members of both parties having killed each other off.
Sick. All right.
We're laughing about it, but like it's not that funny.
No, it's not funny. It's like, trust me, man. I got two little ones. I'm hopeful, but I'm also like, oh man, just writing's on the wall a little bit. But like you said, can't really predict these things. So, and forgive me, man, but what is your degree in? Is it specifically ancient Greek, or is it history as a whole? And the reason I ask is I am curious, how much do you think of our history that's taught today is accurate? Or are we guessing a lot? Or do you think it's very accurate?
So my degree is from a classics department, which means classics means that you have to learn ancient Greek and Latin and attain a certain proficiency of the surviving ancient Greek and Latin texts. But my concentration within that was in ancient philosophy. So I got my PhD at Princeton, where there's a collaboration. You can be in the program in classical philosophy, but you're in the classics department. So I'm pretty familiar with the ancient Greek and Latin, ancient corpuses, and I have a specialty in the philosophy in particular, and especially in Stoicism. That's my main focus. But I have a general sense of like the academic culture and topics of interest, etc.
Has there been any major discoveries? Because I would imagine, and the only one I'm thinking of like a parallel here is ancient Egypt, right? And there's a lot of drama around it. There are people who are like,
you've heard about the stuff under the pyramids?
Of course, I've heard about the stuff under the pyramids. The old Doppler technology, right? Is what it's called, or something like that. My point though is, it does seem like, I mean, and then there's Graham Hancock. There's some interesting cats, right? I was just throwing out theories. Who I am not at all versed to be able to like actually sit there and tell you like who's right or wrong, which is part of the problem, I think, for a lot of people. But do you find it's hard to make new discoveries? Has there been any? Let's talk about like Greek history. Has there been any modern, like, whoa, we didn't know that, and now it's changed anything? Or do you feel like we have a pretty good grasp on what happened?
Okay, so in my particular field of classics, okay, there have been discoveries, but this is what a discovery looks like. So there's an announcement, so-and-so at such university discovered a new poem by Sappho.
Okay.
Which is a big deal in classics. Okay. But when these discoveries happen, or somebody discovered this page of a long lost treatise of Aristotle, let's say. Okay. Now, these discoveries are not made in some archaeological site. This is the interesting thing. So almost all the papyri that we have now, which is still unstudied, undeciphered, are in boxes in various libraries and universities in the world.
Stop.
Yeah. And the thing is that, like, there are not that many papyrologists. Papyrologists are the people that study these papyri, right? So in the past century and a half, there have been a lot of excavations in Egypt, and Egypt is where we find like 90-something% of all our papyri, because it's the only place where the ground is so dry that papyrus can just survive in the sand for thousands of years. Like, I have archaeologist friends who have seen excavators just pull out a manuscript from the sand. Okay.
Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy
The
to think
thing is
that
that-
survives.
Okay, so this has happened a lot over the last century and a bit more. In fact, fun fact, Aristotle's study of the Athenian constitution was discovered on an Egyptian papyrus and was unknown to the founders of the United States. So like when Jefferson and Adams and others were designing the U.S. Constitution and they decided to go with Rome instead of Athens as the model, they actually, even if they wanted to use Athens as the model, they probably couldn't have because they didn't yet have the only surviving full description of that system. Anyway, that's just a side note. So, especially then in the past century, there was a place called Oxyrhynchus, which I believe is in the Fayum semi-oasis. It's like this, it's a tributary of the Nile, and it creates this little oasis that's like off the Nile. And they were going to develop it for modern habitation. And the Egyptian government basically told the archaeologists, okay, look, we're going to like bulldoze through this area. You have, a few weeks or months or maybe a couple of years to dig in any way you want before we just bulldoze through this. Okay. Now, normally archaeology is very, very slow. You kind of use a brush to brush away layers of sand, right? But these guys were under pressure. So they just started using like shovels to just, we're going to destroy a lot, but that's the only choice we have to preserve something, right? And they discovered by the way, can I curse on this podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Run it.
So they discovered like a fuck ton of papyri in Oxyrhynchus. It's called the Oxyrhynchus papyri. It's still being studied and published now, like decades later.
Wow.
Okay? And so similarly, in all the major universities and libraries in the world that have classical studies, they have like a few boxes of papyri that are still unstudied, unpublished, and there's usually like one papyrologist in-house who will never be able to do all of those boxes in their lifetime, but they also don't want to let anybody else help them because suppose they let some graduate student help them and that graduate student discovers the new Sappho poem.
Yeah.
They're not going to get the credit, okay? So they're very possessive of their little stash of papyrus, and so we're getting kind of very slow trickle of what it'd be nice to have a more fast, pipeline for. In terms of new papyri, here's the sad part. We're probably not going to discover that many new papyri from Egypt because the population has exploded and modern irrigation and modern construction has basically reintroduced humidity to all the areas that would have or could have kept some papyri for us. So we're probably we're probably approaching the end of archaeological discoveries of new papyri.
Wow.
The one hope is that, so the last thing, sorry, you might have heard of the Herculaneum scorched papyrus rolls. We have all of these. So Herculaneum is a city near Pompeii in Italy that was buried by the Vesuvius eruption much more than Pompeii was. And we excavated this villa there called the Villa of the Papyri. And we found like a bunch of papyrus rolls that have been burnt like kind of to a crisp. And we've been unable to unravel them until now. We've unraveled some of them by like just breaking off sections at a time and then gluing them onto like a paper background and then using ultraviolet cameras to try to find the old lettering and so forth. But a lot of them, the majority of these scrolls are burnt so much they're like carbonized, they're unable to be unraveled. But now they're using like kind of particle accelerators to just shoot, particles through these and create like digital maps and then digitally unravel them. So it's possible that we're going to be able to read all of those in the next decade or so.
So cool. I was going to ask my simple brain. I was like, this sounds like a ChatGPT problem, man. Just take the papyrus guy and just say, come on, buddy, upload some photos, make it happen. Have you tried to study and it's just difficult? Like, are you interested in that? Would you, if you had an opportunity to learn, would you try and do that?
What, the papyri?
Mm-hmm.
I've done some of that work like as a student. Like I actually took part in an excavation in Egypt.
Cool.
During which our team discovered one of the only known ancient classrooms ever discovered.
That's awesome.
But see, here's the thing, okay? And again, I'm going to like ruffle some feathers here, but so we had a papyrologist on the team. He was the head of the excavation, and we discovered this room. It's from the 3rd century AD. So we're talking about the Roman period. And in Egypt, Roman era means Greek speaking, okay? So it's a Greek-speaking Roman era classroom with kind of inspirational quotes written on a plaster wall. So there's a white plaster wall, and then there's red, like kind of fresco paint that says things like, "Oh, students, come to the fountain of the muses and drink the inspiration of Apollo," stuff like that, okay? So like kind of inspirational quotes to get the students pumped up about their lessons, okay? Now, as you can imagine, okay, I'm like a 19-year-old kid on this dig. This is unbelievably exciting. This is more, I mean, we were expecting to find some potsherds, and we found a freaking classroom. Okay, this is unbelievably exciting, right?
Yeah.
So all of us, students were just dying to go look at this inscription and try to, we had a few years of Greek in our belt, we weren't that great. The papyrologist boss wouldn't let us look at it.
Oh, what a dork.
He wanted to come up with his translation before anybody else looked at it. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, we barely can even finish like a textbook of Greek. Like, we're not any threat to you, and you're going to prevent us from looking at this so
what a bummer.
I'm still kind of pissed off about that,
I can see that, man, but I don't blame you, man. Wow, that's cool. So you could say you discovered or helped discover classroom. That's really cool. That is really, really cool. I want to pivot just slightly here. Am I right? I said it in like our first couple minutes, but am I right in saying that Plato's cave or the Matrix is inspired by Plato's cave? Is that correct, or are people just assuming that?
No, I think there's no doubt that it's inspired by Plato's cave. Yeah. What
other movies? Is it The Brave New World? I think George Orwell writes, what is it? Are those some of the few? Is there any others?
I mean, have you seen The Island with Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson?
Not off the top of my head, but
there's a lot. I mean, almost any movie that's going to be about some group of people that are kept in the dark and are fed lies is going to be inspired one way or another by the Republic, by the cave. So,
I mean, that's so. Do you ever think about that? Is this like 2,400 years ago or something? That's unbelievable. If you really think about it, these ideas are still popping around, and not only just popping around, but like, I think it's interesting that a movie like The Matrix, yes, it's a good movie, but I always feel like it's something that we all are like unaware of, like it's unconscious. We're just kind of like, we watch it and we are like, whoa, like there's something to it. I think more than just the actors and the filming of it that pulls us in. The idea of it is what really captures people. And I think that's fascinating.
I mean, in my opinion, the cave story is more fascinating than The Matrix. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love The Matrix, okay? But it doesn't have as many layers. I mean, the cave has so many layers, right? And so many dimensions to it. Yes, it has the Matrix angle, like these are prisoners, they're being oppressed, they're kept in the dark, they're possibly used, they're being fed lies, etc. So there is that kind of political power dynamic thing going on. But then there's also the epistemological or the knowledge related question of like, well, what actually is knowledge, and what like that's an angle that's not really explored in the Matrix movie, right? Like,
yeah,
how can this cave analogy help us understand the nature of knowledge more than we do?
So good, man. Is there anything else from Plato that you feel like we should know as far as for my audience?
Well, maybe I should tell you about that, about the knowledge thing.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Because we haven't talked about like the forms or anything, right?
Let's get into it.
Okay, so as everybody who's willingly or unwillingly had to sit through like a intro to philosophy course knows, Plato had this idea of the forms, which is kind of the world, the non-physical world of eternal truths. Okay, and so one of the things that the analogy of the cave is trying to do is to kind of explain what those forms are. Okay, so let's clarify this distinction between the two worlds for Plato. Okay, you have the physical world and the world of the forms. Another way he distinguishes it is he calls it the world of becoming and the world of being. Okay, everything that you perceive with your senses is the world of becoming, because nothing stays the same. Even a diamond, which seems to be the hardest material we know of, is actually evaporating particles once in a while, and it could break theoretically. The sun will eventually burn out. The earth will eventually be swallowed up by the sun. Nothing is permanent in the world that our senses perceive. Everything is changing, and so that's the world of becoming. But the world of being is unchanging, and the Pythagorean theorem was never other than it is now, and nor will it ever cease to be true. So that is, in a sense, an eternal object in the world of being. The form of a circle or of a triangle those are eternal objects, which, even though we cannot perceive directly, our mind can perceive them in a sense, and those things never change. So physical versus non-physical world, or world of becoming versus the world of being, and the third way he distinguishes it is the world of sense perception versus the noetic world, the world that only the mind's eye can see. Okay, so he has this distinction, and he says knowledge only pertains to the second category, the world of being, of the mind's eye that is immaterial. And the natural reaction is like, WTF? That's like, if anything, I know that this is a book, right? Like, that's much more secure knowledge than something that I cannot perceive. And Plato says, no, actually, it's not true. And modern scholars of philosophy and casual readers, they tend to hate this, but I would argue that what he's saying, if you just adjust the vocabulary, is not at all different from what modern science says. So modern science not only acknowledges but insists that every empirical claim or measurement has a margin of error. The most precise calculation of the trajectory of some object will come with a margin of error. Every time when engineers build a bridge and they measure the tensile strength of the cables, they have a margin of error. Every single thing in every empirical science comes with a margin of error. Whereas in mathematics, there is no margin of error. Like, if you measure the triangle and you have the angles and you have the sides and you measure this length, that's perfect. There's no margin of error there. So Plato's just saying that the only realm of our thinking where we have no margin of error is in that non-physical realm. And there is real knowledge there because math is in that realm. So that by itself proves that we do have real knowledge of real things that are not physical, which have no margin of error. And by contrast, everything in this physical world has a margin of error. So he calls the quote unquote knowledge of physical things, he calls that belief, because it doesn't have absolute certainty. Whereas knowledge in the realm of being, of noetic things, of the mind's eye, that can be actual knowledge because it's perfect and has no margin of error. Okay, I can stop there or I can go on. You tell me.
Oh, keep going, brother. Now we're talking, Jack. I love it.
All right, so he kind of says this in various dialogues, but people are still like, well, this still sounds crazy to me, right? So the cave is going to try to explain, to make it more palatable to people like you and me, that there might actually be this world of being that is more a source of more secure knowledge than the world around us that we perceive with our senses. Okay, so he makes this compelling image of the prisoners in the cave and how they come out into the real world, right? So they start off in a world that is further down the knowledge ladder than we are. And they eventually come to where we are now, right? Like you and I can go outside and we can look at the sun. But in this story, that's the end point. Okay? It starts several layers of obfuscation and ignorance below that. And it culminates in what we see as the familiar everyday reality. Okay? So we can totally understand that ascent. There's nothing strange about that.
Nope.
But here's the genius thing. Plato says, okay, now, so you understand how that ascent works from a level that's way beneath you. But now imagine that your current state is the prisoner in the cave.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. So if your current state is actually that like 3 moves down bondage in the cave state, now use your like an analogous, use your ability to think through analogies to imagine what it would be like to go several levels higher, and that's the true knowledge.
Oh man, I love it. I know you're not as deep as I am in my world, but I'm telling you, man, there's a lot of there's a lot of similarities there. I mean, I think that's what drew me to it initially. I was like reading it, and I was like, man, that's fascinating, and it's just a different way of saying it. I love that. I love that. One of the best thinkers of all time is thinking about these things. That's super cool, man. I wish we had more from him. I'm sure you wish that too.
We do have a lot. I mean, I'm not upset. I mean, he's one of the few philosophers for whom we have like his entire corpus.
Okay, so I'm just a dumbass. I just have
almost his entire corpus.
Is there anyone else from that time period that could have been like a Plato-ish character, but we just don't have enough?
There's a lot of fascinating people. Like there's Democritus, who's the father of atomic theory.
What does that mean?
Well, he was the first person to posit that the universe is made of particles, like atoms and void. He said his famous line is, "Everything is atoms and void."
I just don't understand.
He's kind of like the anti-Plato. In fact,
okay.
Plato never mentions him by name, but we can kind of sense that Plato really, really didn't like him. So Democritus is like Democritus. Okay, if we're gonna think of analogies today, Democritus is like one of those superstar public intellectuals, like Sam Harris or Jordan Peterson or whatever, like one of these high-profile Joe Rogan guests who loves the current system, loves democracy, loves science, loves all the new technological innovations, and just explains them all in absolutely compelling ways. And Plato's the guy saying like, no, it's all going to crash and burn. There's a higher reality. And then it did crash and burn. So we have Plato's writings because they seem to be vindicated by history, and we don't have Democritus's writings. But it would be awesome to have Democritus's writings to see, like, as I said, like who would be the high-profile Joe Rogan guest of ancient Athens? That's Democritus. That's Protagoras. It's not Plato.
Man, this is great. I gotta say, man, when you said yes to come on, I got real nervous because I was like, oh gosh, I'm just gonna get exposed on this channel here, on my own channel. But I really appreciate you, man. I really appreciate you hopping on here and explaining that. I think it's a fascinating read. I think I need to dive into it, The Republic, more. Is that what you'd recommend? Start there as far as Plato's work?
Well, I mean, I'd have to know what your main interest is.
Bro, I like trippy stuff. I like when you start talking about the forms and stuff. This is my alley. This is what I enjoy. So I like the cave, though. I know that. Is that just, so explain this to me. It's just a chapter in the Republic, or is it a big portion of it? Because you said the Republic is basically
it's about 10% of the Republic.
Oh, wow. Okay. In a perfect world, when I'm doing this full-time podcasting, I will have read that before I come on and talk with you so that I have like a better understanding. But that's cool, man. I think there's a lot of similarities for sure, and kind of the world I play in and
Well,
what Plato
why
talks
don't
about.
you? I'm curious, like what, because the things we said about the cave seem to resonate with you. So, what in particular resonated with your experiences?
So for me, when I had those out of body experiences, it was like this realization that I was more than my body,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that in itself is a pretty big brain buster. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
shatters your world. I always grew up with just like a lot of people, the question of why. I mean, I grew up religious. I was kind of told what to believe. Um, I wouldn't say my mom would argue that she wasn't this way, but I would say that I wasn't encouraged to ask questions. Like I definitely was naturally like wanting to ask things. Things didn't make sense to me when I'd be sitting in church. Not again, and I'm not even poo-pooing on church per se. I've always been that way. And so for me to get this validation on my own was pretty big. And so now it's like this podcast is kind of like I love being the guy that runs back in the cave, kind of, right? And being like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, and I really try, Jack, not to say that this is how it is, but I do love to encourage people to maybe put whatever it is that they believe in, maybe put it on the shelf for a little bit and just explore because there's a lot more when you're open to it. I just think there's a lot more out there, and these experiences are, man, they're so powerful. And I love reading just as much as the next guy. I love thinking about these things, but the experience is what, in my opinion, goes from belief, like I can believe these things are true, until like a knowing. And even that, I guess, can be subjective. Like, but um, I think that's where the power is, man. And so that story to me is like, it's that. I mean, it's just, there's more out there. And then, for me on our end, so like I brought up some stuff because this is like, have you heard of the Monroe Institute at all?
It rings a bell, but maybe not. I don't know.
So it's started by this guy named Robert Monroe. Um, he was a psychologist, and he was someone who started basically having out of body experiences happen to him, and he wrote his whole story about it. It's like journeys out of the body. It's a fascinating perspective from a guy who's pretty logical, like pretty analytical. He wasn't like he was scared to talk about it because he was like, I'm gonna get like if someone came to me with these stories, I'd be putting them on medication basically. And so he's very hesitant to like bring these stories out. But eventually he did, right? It became so impactful in his life. Like he kept at first he was scared. It started just like the story. So I'm telling you, it's like he saw the fire and he's like, whoa, like it freaked him out, right? That's the analogy there. Like he kept popping out of his body. He's like, what's going on? But over time, and when I say time, I think it was like years, at the very least, like months, right? Where he was like, he would pop out of his body, instantly you get shot back in. You'll start to hear in this world, like when you do finally disconnect, your thoughts on the other side are extremely important. That world is dominated by your thoughts, and they're almost like physical forms. And so if you're thinking about something, a place, you can be there. If you're scared, your fears, they can manifest themselves around you. It's often talked about that when you leave your body, you have to face those fears, which is for a lot of people. For me, I'll just talk about me. It's scary for me. Like it's one of those things that does keep me, I think, from fully being able to do it consistently. Um, and so some of the best teachers in this space have talked about when they pop out, they'll see that creepy, dark figure, right? But when they really confront it, they realize it's their own self, right? In a lot of ways, it's that or it's an addiction. It's something in you that's manifesting physically. And they're fascinating stories when you hear about them. But when you burst through that, it reminds me of the cave, right? Like you see these things, and when you finally break out and you actually go outside and you go, whoa, there's so much more. And so Robert Monroe's a really good story, probably because he's established the most professional institute out there. It's also where like the CIA, I think it was in, what's the date? In 1983, they did a whole report on the Gateway experience. They sent agents there. It's on the government website. There's a paper you can read about it, but they sent people to learn because he was starting to teach people. He did it through binaural beats and a technology he created called HemiSync. It's basically it's a tone, right? But it's slightly off. Like the left is slightly off from the right, and it creates basically has your. I'm gonna do horrible explaining this, but it allows your brain to sync up, and so in a way that just is not possible, and it puts you into a state that allows you to start having these phenomena happen. And I think it's fascinating because his stories are interesting. You see him as he's like, "Am I crazy?" To like, "Wait, there's more," to being scared, to like pushing past those fears, to then exploring. And he's been what he calls like kind of outside of this, like he's seen Earth from what it is, and he's the one who coined these terms. Like you probably hear it, like loosh gets thrown around a lot in my world. Loosh is kind of like, again, this is where you and me are so funny because you're to the facts, like, and rightfully so. But I don't know, we just have this guy's account of it, and others now who've said that they've done it, but I've never experienced it. But loosh is kind of this substance that we create as humans, and in a weird way, love, emotions, these things create. There's more to it than just an emotion. Like this place is built for that. We're kind of in a weird way. In his second book, he talked about it, seeing us as like some kind of farm for a different being system. Long story short, though, man, he's just an interesting guy who's like I view as very. Yeah, he's not like some hippie guy you kind of picture living out of his van, like taking drugs all day. He like had these experiences without taking anything. And he created a process that's repeatable. And now his school is still like long-standing to date. You can go there and you can take courses, and there's plenty of people who are having these experiences now because of what he set up. And I think that's pretty cool.
It's funny because before you emailed me, I had never thought about out-of-body experiences in Plato in the same, sentence or in the same context. But now that I'm talking to you about it, I can think of actually several different places in his work where you could argue that there's an out-of-body experience type thing or adjacent phenomenon being discussed. Like, for example, are you familiar with the theory of recollection in Plato? So Plato believes that all knowledge acquisition is actually remembering or recollecting things that our soul beheld between incarnations.
It's the same in the out-of-body space. So they say that some of the technology that we have today is stuff it's already there. We're just, and you can go as far as like, the guys who created the rockets. I'm missing the names. Maybe I'll put it up on screen. But some of the guys responsible for launching like modern day rockets, and not only that, but technology. Right? Those musicians talk about it a lot. They get these downloads. So you could call it whatever you want, but they'll tell you like, I didn't really come up with that, man. Like it just kind of came to me, whether it be in a dream or whatever it is. But they're pulling from somewhere else. Artists is a really good example because they talk about getting in a flow state, and these lyrics will just come to them. A lot of them can't even read music, and they're pulling this stuff off they say they just get in a state. It's interesting, man. Some of our inventions that I think are around today come from people who will tell you that, hey man, I got this from a dream or a process. Something came to them. I think that's fascinating. It sounds kind of what you're saying, something like that.
Yeah, and then like another example is so for Plato, between incarnations, like when you die, your soul leaves the body. It might go through a kind of purgatory if you've been a bad person, but eventually it will inhabit another body. Okay, but between the two incarnations, it may rise to the realm of the forms and behold all of the truths of the world. And so when you learn geometry, when you learn the Pythagorean theorem, you're not discovering the Pythagorean theorem, you're remembering it from that inter-incarnated time period of your soul. Okay. And when you experience, like, if you have like a kind of philosophical love with somebody, and the two of you discover some truth together, and you feel like you're soaring, that's because your soul, he says, is like sprouting feathers and wings, and it feels that tingling sensation, and your soul is like flying back up to that realm. And then finally, the last point is, in the so-called seventh letter, which was one of the rare non-published or non-officially published works of Plato that we still have, he talks about like what it's like to behold one of these forms, and he describes it like a flash. So like you're thinking about geometry for years, and you're proving all these theorems, and you're working through all these figures in your book, and then at some point you just have this flash and you like behold the geometric forms in that instant.
Wow.
Anyway, just some
No, I
data
love
points
it.
for you. Yeah.
I love it, man. Yeah, it's like for me, it's another angle that's kind of it's just yeah, I didn't know until I read The Cave, and I was like, wow, that's cool. There's even on so have you heard of Project Stargate? Are you familiar with that at all?
No.
So it's from like 1970s to I think almost the 2000s. Our government basically funded, I think it's like 20 mil, man. It was like they put a lot of money into this to research remote viewing. So remote viewing is another form of out of body, but it's people who claim they can, like it sounds, leave their consciousness and go see something on this planet whilst being in the White House, right? So you could see how that would be interesting to a government. And they've done a lot of tests on it. They say they shut it down, but like many things, they say they shut down. Like, who knows? But there's someone like Ingo Swann who she remote viewed. I think it's Jupiter or their the rings or something, and then later that was verified by one of our. It's just interesting. These people have been able to do these things, and so they're all kind of intertwined. I don't know. I just think it's fascinating. I mean, there's things that I can like state from the government side that they've been testing these things. There's obviously personal testimonies, which are, I got to tell you, man, I've listened to over 100 NDE stories. I've listened to and interviewed quite a few OBE people, and then my own experience. There's some really credible stories. There's also a lot of woo that you got to kind of weed through. But it's if you can kind of hold that objective kind of in curious state of mind, and you can look into something like Plato and see some similarities there and see it over here. It's cool. It just adds to the story for me. That's why I was excited to have you on, because it just adds to the story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, all right, my brother. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. But yeah, man, I just want to say thank you for coming on, for accepting this. I know it's probably like, whoa, this is quite a different channel to be on, but I'm glad we were able to talk. I think I think we bridged a couple of things, which is kind of cool. I think you said you walked away with like not thinking about a couple of things. I love that. So, and same with me. So thanks, dude. Appreciate you.
Thanks a lot for having me. It was a lot of fun. And in case any of your listeners want a deeper dive in the Republic, I do have like a pretty in-depth series on my podcast. It's called Ancient Greece Declassified, as well as a single kind of video summary on my YouTube channel, Lantern Jack. So
love it, dude.
Thanks again.
I'll link everything down below, man. So
yeah.
We'll put your YouTube channel, all that. I'll send you a collab link too, if you're open to it. Can or cannot accept, but
sounds good.
All right, man.
Thank you.
Dude, appreciate you. Have a good day. We'll talk soon, man. Cheers.